It's 5 o'clock, so we'll get started. Hi, I'm Anna Marquise, and I'm the Civic Engagement Coordinator. Welcome to the People's Review Live, hosted by us, the Equality State Policy Center. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to improve the lives of all Wyoming's people through transparent government, fair elections, and thriving communities. The People's Review Live is designed to help people across Wyoming engage with our government and keep up with important issues and debates. When we work together, we can ensure transparent government, fair elections, and thriving communities. And that's never been more important than it is right now. First, I want to say thank you to our generous People's Review Live Leadership Circle members who make this program possible. Marcia Kunstill and Joe Albright, Joanne Skeem True and Shane True, Mike Shaughnessy and Kathy Jenkins, and an anonymous donor. If you'd like to learn how to become a Leadership Circle member, please email me, and you can find my email in the chat or on our website. I also want to note that two of our panelists, House Minority Whip Clifford and Representative Newsome, are probably going to be joining us late tonight as they're still busy at the legislature right now. And for some context, March is Women's History Month, and we're right in the middle of the 66th Wyoming legislature. So it's fitting that the Wyoming Women's Foundation has released a new policy brief on Wyoming women in elected roles. You can find it on our website and on the Wyoming Women's Foundation website as well. We'll drop the link in the chat. The report, which was prepared by the Wyoming Survey and Analysis Center at UW, is part of a series of briefs that the Wyoming Women's Foundation and ESPC are working on that look at the status of women in a number of areas impacting economic self-sufficiency. Now for some reminders. Currently, just 16 of Wyoming's 90 state legislators are women. At the county commission level, 18 out of our state's 93 commissioners are women. We do a little bit better in the big five of the executive branch, where 2 out of 5 elected officials are women. And of course, 2 out of 3 members of our federal delegation are also women. The new brief looks at some of the structural obstacles preventing women from running for office, and it looks at some opportunities too, which is why we're excited to have this panel assembled tonight. Not only do we have representatives from executive, legislative, and local elected offices, we also have some national perspective from RepresentWomen, a group working to help women achieve gender parity in public office throughout the United States. And we're especially excited to have former representative and ESPC board member Sara Burlingame, who will be moderating tonight. Sara is the executive director at Wyoming Equality, and she's the former representative for House District 44. She has a background in faith organizing that centers on racial and socioeconomic justice. She's on the board of Arts Cheyenne and a member of the Cheyenne Police Advisory Committee. Sara is proud to identify as a scrappy trailer park kid who made good. She lives with her husband, Jason Thomas, and their 2 darling barbarian children, Atticus and Emerson, in South Cheyenne. Sara is respected by her peers for bringing a unique and often underrepresented perspective to state government. Immensely outgoing, she's also an effective coalition builder who has developed strong relationships on both sides of the aisle. Take it away, Sara. You're muted.
There, I was pressing it, I swear, guys. Hey, thank you so much, Anna, and thank you so much, amazing panel. This is a good way to spend a Thursday night. So I want to kick us off by introducing our panel and having them, excuse me, tell a little bit about themselves. I think we're going to have a fantastic discussion tonight. So I'm going to get started with City Councilwoman Pollock, and we'll just kind of go around the table. And if you guys tell us a little bit about it yourselves, and then we're just going to jump right in and start talking about women and leadership in elected roles in Wyoming.
Thank you, Sara. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amber Pollock. I am a native of Casper, Wyoming. I was born here, grew up here. I went to the University of Wyoming studying music education. I got a bachelor's and a master's in music ed, and then returned back to Casper to teach music, and somewhere along the way got onto a totally different track and opened a distillery with my family here. So I've been in that industry for about 7 years, and I was elected in this most recent election to the Casper City Council. So I've been serving there just for a couple months, so very fresh, and I'm one of 9 members at our local municipal government here in Casper. I do some other work as well around the state in areas of economic focus. So I'm the president of a group called Engage, which is focused on empowering younger generations to take a more active role in building our economy and participating with their governments and communities. I am on the board of the Distillers Guild and also the American Craft Spirits Association. And that's, I think, it for relevance in this conversation. So thank you.
All right, State Auditor Racines.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm Kristi Racines. I've been serving as the state auditor for a little over 2 years. I was born in Wyoming and kind of moved all over the place, born in Casper, lived in Casper for a time and then Evanston, but mostly identify as a Riverton kid. That's where I graduated high school and where my folks still are. Went to UW and got degrees in accounting and Spanish, and then became a certified public accountant after that and went into public accounting because that's what one does after that. I did that for a while, and when I had a baby, I decided that public accounting at the time, although it has become somewhat friendlier, didn't really mix super well with babies. So I went and got myself a government job. I went to work for the court system and worked for the Supreme Court here in Cheyenne as an internal auditor. Eventually became the CFO, which is how I ended up hanging out at the legislature far too often. And through a series of events, ended up throwing my name in the hat for state auditor 2.5 years ago. It was not in my 5-year plan. Certainly. So that's where I forget what did Anna say about Sara about being immensely outgoing, or there was some qualifier. Whatever the opposite of that is, that's what I am.
I love the way extroverts and introverts all find their way to public office. We are going to talk about that later. Thank you, Madam Auditor. And finally, and I think we will be joined, by 2 others, but for who we have right now, finally, RepresentWomen CEO Cynthia Richie Terrell.
Yes, thank you
Glad
so
to
much.
have you with us.
I am not in Wyoming right now, but I can say that I have visited the state many times, and I actually worked on a campaign there in Cheyenne, but I'm embarrassed to say that I can't remember what congressional campaign it was. It was a while ago. I'm very old, suffice it to say, and I actually started out, I graduated from college like on a Friday or a Saturday, and then like the next Monday, I think I started work on my first Senate campaign. And then it's just like pell-mell. For you guys have been candidates, but if you're a campaign worker, you just get called up by somebody and they say like, go to Wyoming, go to Cheyenne, that's where we need you. And it feels super urgent. So I was there actually for a while and worked, did a lot of door knocking and so forth, as I recall. But after doing that campaign work, I helped to found an organization called Fair Vote that has taken on sort of a cutting edge role in thinking about big solutions to big upstream problems, talking about automatic voter registration and the right to vote in the US Constitution and a national popular vote for president. And then this idea that our winner take all politics are really fueling a lot of the division and polarization that exists. And that was fun. We started that in the early 90s, and now some of the big ideas like ranked choice voting have really taken off, and that's super exciting to see. Even in places like Wyoming, I was listening into a state committee hearing the other day. A few years ago, the centennial of suffrage was approaching, and at that point, the United States ranked, I think, 106th or something for women's representation worldwide, and it's clear to me that it's not that the women somehow in those countries are better, or that the men are better. I always say that and hope people will laugh. It's a joke. Obviously, neither the men or the women are better in the countries that rank above the United States in women's representation, of which there are about 70 now, but they have different rules and systems which level the playing field for women, both as candidates and as elected officials. So my organization, Represent Women, studies every country in the world and every jurisdiction, as many as we can in the United States, to glean the best practices, things that are really working, so that more women can run, more women win when they run, more women are able to serve effectively once they've won, and more women can rise to leadership selection processes. And so super excited to have this conversation. There are a lot of barriers and obstacles women face. And I guess my mission is to expand the conversation from what I think often becomes a conversation just about individual women, barriers people may feel individually, to examining the structural barriers that are built in and embedded in our super antiquated electoral system, norms and practices, and then galvanize and build support for reforms that I think will really help to level the playing field for all women.
Amen. This is going to be a great discussion. I think we want to hit on all of those cylinders in our discussion tonight: the personal, the structural, what it is like to run for office in Wyoming. So I sat down to write a little introduction for this, a couple of days ago, and ESPC asked if I wanted to moderate. And the first thing that came to my mind was a clash that I had. When a former teacher had reached out to me. I'd just been elected to public office, and he asked me a question that caught me off guard. He asked, "What's it like to have power now?" And I thought, oh, I don't conceptualize it that way at all. I don't think of myself as, now I have achieved power. I conceptualize it as, now I'm in a place to serve. And when I talk to women in public office around Wyoming, I always see that reflected back to me, right? We're here to serve the public. We're here in other aspects of my life. I serve, what I think is my community. And this is just another avenue in which I hope to serve. But that kind of bumped up with when I was thinking about tonight's panel. I just intuitively thought, oh, this is great. We're going to have all these women in the room, and one from out of state, who are shaping Wyoming. These are the women who are shaping the future of Wyoming. Your policies, your decisions, your conversations are helping to shape what Wyoming becomes in this next generation. And I think those two ideas are in tension, right? That yes, it is service, but yes, maybe we do a disservice to the women who come after us and maybe to ourselves if we don't acknowledge that we're playing a pretty specific role in this. And I'm wondering if any of you have struggled with either articulating that, or to say there's an expectation that as a woman, you only speak in terms of your service and maybe not some of the other aspects of it. Does anybody want to take that? The introvert.
There was a question in there somewhere. I mean, I think they're. I think we do have a reticence to sort of claim that power, even when it's there, and and yeah, I would tell you, gosh, I didn't do this because I wanted power. But also not, sometimes we don't recognize that is what we have, even if it's not the way we like it phrased and not how we identify with it. And I think I find myself sometimes making excuses for why I won, or, I just say, oh, I'm just trying to not screw stuff up. That's the bar I'm setting for myself. So I'm not sure if that was an even remotely appropriate response to your eloquent intro.
No, I feel like you're mocking me when you say eloquent, Madam Auditor.
It really was.
So I had a sort of a parallel experience the other day. I was speaking to a middle school here in town about local government, and one of the kids, they had prepared questions for me, and one of the kids said, "So how much authority do you have?" And I said, well, and it like totally threw me off guard, because it's like, I don't really think of it in terms of how much authority do I have or whatever. And so that was the first time I really had considered that, like, well, how much authority do I really have? Like, not that much, because, you need to convince quite a few people to get any idea through, and it moves pretty slow. And it's, we're subject to constituent input, year round, coming into us and, critiquing our decisions. So to me, it's like, well, not very much, but I think maybe I don't think of it as service so much. I feel it as like responsibility more than service or power, perhaps. But maybe that's sort of like the intermingling of the two in a way, of service and power, where it's like, now it's responsibility, because you gotta, it's not, maybe it is doing a disservice to the role, and to the influence that we actually can exert by being in an elected position, if we don't acknowledge that like potential to influence exists, and we just say like, oh, I'm just here to like be here for you.
Cynthia, do you find that in other places women have this same conversation, and do you find that men are asking themselves this, or do they just assume the mantle of authority a little more easily?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not one that I've thought about very much, so I don't have anything particularly sage to say. I do know that the statistics have shown that men, of course, think that they're prepared to run for office with, just average or subpar qualifications. Women often feel like they've got to, triple prepare and still maybe not feel qualified. So I think that men and women on average may enter politics with a different definition of their own power and their legitimacy. But I do think there's an opportunity for women that seems very important and exciting, really, to redefine what that power is. I mean, there's the power that rests in the two of you, or the more of you who have been or are now elected officials. Like that is a certain kind of a power, but to figure out how to wield that responsibly, as you said, and redefine what that is. So it's a power to be building relationships and supporting people, using your power for good, I guess, in a transformative way, as opposed to using power to dislodge or dismantle or disrupt, though there's a certain amount of disruption, frankly, that has to happen. So I'm pro disruption in a confined sense. But I guess it's important. I do think I'm getting around to an answer here. I think it's important for women to own the power that we have and not feel shy about bringing all of our lived experience to define that power. So it is significant that we're able to multitask and remember a recipe and remember to pick up our child and get the dog to the vet and help our parents do their taxes and have an opinion at the town hall meeting or whatever. Like, that's a certain kind of power, which I think that women have in greater volume. I'm not quite sure how you measure that. And we should own that. And that's an important, I think, part of transformative policy making, is being able to hold up all of the nuance and the things that don't quite fit, try to figure out how to make them fit together. And I guess doing all that by building relationships, I think that's the most kind of the power to work collaboratively is sort of maybe a counterintuitive thing. I think often people think of power as a individual thing, like you get your power from being who you are. But I think redefining that as we get our power collaboratively or collectively, I think that's I hope, the future.
Somewhere a grad student is writing a paper right now about the feminist, like Spider-Man concept of,
Yes,
with
right.
great responsibility comes something. I'm going to read this off. This is from our ESPC fact sheet. Wyoming was the first for women's suffrage 151 years ago. And I really credit Senator Affie Ellis and Jill Lovato here in town with helping to shift that language when we talk about, I feel like every other place they talk about Wyoming granted women the right to vote. And I feel like those two have really helped us shift that language to say, no, Wyoming was the first to acknowledge women's inherent right to vote. And that's very different. That's very different when we think of ourselves as heirs to a constitutional right. And in the 1980s and up until 1992, Wyoming was among the nation's leaders in electing women. We have Jackson, with their all-female elected officials. Now, the last few years, Wyoming has had record low numbers of women in the state legislature. What do we need to do to reverse this trend? And this is probably where Cynthia comes in. How much of this is systemic and how much of this is individual?
Well, I for sure don't think there's any one answer for sure. So, and I'm not quite sure how you would even, well, let me start again. It's definitely both, but one of the reasons that the United States does so poorly compared to other countries is we focus almost exclusively on preparing individual women to run. And we encourage women to run, which of course I'm a big fan of. I think that work is very important, without very much attention paid to the institutional barriers that women face when they run, or the voting systems that prevail in the United States, or the norms that prevail in the legislative process. Is there on-site childcare? Is there paid leave? Is there a bathroom? Is there a nursing room? Can I bring my child to the floor if I have to feed her? All those kinds of things. And then how do women to rise to leadership positions? And I can say with some complete confidence that what is moving women's representation, what's electing more women faster around the globe are different rules and systems. Again, there's nothing comparable to our pipeline approach, shall we say, in other countries. They have gender quotas, they have proportional voting systems largely. They've many countries have some kind of a national commission on women or cabinet level position on women that even countries I've had fellows from that we don't think of as amazing. Well, I shouldn't cast any aspersions. Developing countries often have things in place to not only come up with ideas, but to enforce those ideas. And I think we need more of that in the United States. So
Sure.
Some examples are political parties, I think, should be held accountable for the number or the percentage of women they recruit. They should work with the amazing organizations that are on the ground preparing individual women, and they should feel public pressure to recruit more women to run for office. So that seems clear. Political action committees and donors should set targets for the amount of money they're going to give to women candidates so that women don't have to do all that extra legwork on their own, but there's actually an institutional support for women's candidacies. Then we face the burden of the electoral system, which in most places now really splits votes. It limits the number of open seats. And it really constricts who can run and where they can win. So we need to change that. And then, as I mentioned, there are these legislative norms, which are often prohibitive for anybody who's doing all those multitasking things, having to work, having to take care of children, having to take care of parents. We need to reevaluate and have a very gender conscious set of legislative practices. And then we need to look at leadership selection practices too. Joe Biden demonstrated the power of executives to name diverse people to cabinets and to other leadership positions. And I think we need to hold all of our commissions and boards and governors and mayors accountable for pushing for that kind of diverse leadership really at every level of government. So I hope I've answered that question to a certain degree. I think the solution is both, but I think we overemphasize preparing individual women to run with not enough emphasis on examining the structural barriers they face when they run.
All right.
And to answer your first question, you said there was a history of these multi-seat districts being used in Wyoming and elsewhere in the West that really did elect more women to the House. In fact, Jeanette Rankin, elected from Montana, was elected from a multi-seat district in 1916, and they elect about twice as many women on average as single seat districts. But we would combine them now with ranked choice voting because there's a problem with a winner take all at large system. We can talk
Okay,
about
well, we'll get to ranked choice voting and other things that Wyoming might consider adopting. But I want to introduce my friend and colleague, Minority Whip, Andy Clifford, to the conversation. Andy, do you want to just introduce yourself, tell folks a little bit about who you are and who you represent?
Doska Usini, good afternoon. Hisei.na Sitna. My Arapaho name is Coming Woman. Hinani e Nina. I'm Arapaho, a proud member of the Arapaho tribe. I'm also Cheyenne River Lakota on my father's side. So I'm just honored to be here. And yeah.
Anna, I'm typing you down here. Welcome, Representative Clifford. It's lovely to have you. So we've just kind of kicked off a conversation about what are some systemic ways that women maybe don't think about running for office in the state of Wyoming. Why did we used to be really good at it and now we're not so good at it? And if folks don't know, Representative Clifford is the first Northern Arapaho woman to ever serve in the Wyoming legislature. I'm gonna kind of skip ahead and push some two things together in the interest of time. But if you're on this call, you can see that we've dropped a link to the Wyoming Women in Elected Roles. So that's a policy paper that was put together by a couple of different coalition members here. And one of the things we talk about is the wage gap. And unfortunately, the way that the Wyoming workforce puts it together is they say for every dollar that a man earns, women earn 60 cents, 68 cents to that dollar. But of course, we're kind of crunching together because that's not true, right? For Native women, they're not earning 68 cents on the dollar. I believe they're earning 60 cents on the dollar. So sometimes just the language that we use, right? We're saying women, but we actually mean white women. And that's a way that we can kind of, some of the impact is lost by how we speak about it. So maybe Representative Clifford, if you just want to take a moment to tell us, why do you think it took so long for someone from the Northern Arapaho, for a woman from the Northern Arapaho tribe to be represented in the Wyoming legislature? Were there any forces of colonization or anything else that you feel like had an impact on that?
Yes, with colonization of my people, just eradicating our ways of life, our languages, our ceremonies. From 1819 to 1934, my ancestors being forced to go to boarding school, and they're being treated like prisoners of war. And so that was my grandparents and my father at the age of 4. So I'm the first generation that wasn't forced to have to go to a boarding school. And so with colonization as well, what I've struggled with is within my own tribe. And it's the men, my men, tribal men, that have this colonized thinking, patriarchal thinking, and I've had to push back on that. It hasn't been very welcoming. To have a voice, to have a space, and then to be respected. So I've always had to work really, really hard to justify myself, why my voice was valued or should be valued, and why I was sitting at the table. And then you put just the bigger society of white men into that. In my experience, my journey here, I've had to work really hard when I speak, when I talk, how I articulate myself, just to prove myself for why I'm here. And I'm one to be leading, to be on this journey, but to step aside and let the young people come behind me. And I don't have all the answers, but I know where to get most of them. And I'm not afraid because of the perseverance and resilience of my people, of my ancestors, and what I've taught and what I've saw and what I've heard. And so it's still a battle. And I pick those battles, right? And sometimes I get tired. And sometimes I get overwhelmed. But I know it's important. I have a lot of cute grandbabies, future generations depending on me. And so I just shake that off, right? I surround myself with good mentors. And most of them are not from Wyoming. And a lot of them are women, but there are good men that value women, that I have good relationships with. And so I think that's important as well too, as well as that journey. And we have a long ways to go. When I think tribal, in my tribal world, as far as here representing the state and being a part of the legislative process and creating laws. But I always think Indigenous. I represent both tribes. And so when I say my people, I include the Northern Arapaho and Eastern Shoshone. I have an older sister who's enrolled Shoshone, and I have 3 beautiful granddaughters who are enrolled Shoshone. So when I say my people, I mean both tribes that I'm representing. And it's a balance that I have to strike because they're sovereign nations. And I wholeheartedly get it and I respect it. And so I always push for tribal consultation. It's very important to be listened and to be heard. And so there's a lot of issues that affect my people.
Thank you, Minority Whip Clifford. I feel like that puts such a different spin on things. I don't know about you, like Madam Auditor, Councilwoman Pollock, it already seems like a lot, but if you had to bring in balancing the competing interests of sovereign nations into it, I'll say it every time, Minority Whip Clifford is a gift to the state of Wyoming. So I'd love to hear from Madam Auditor and Councilwoman Pollock, what, if you can just tell us a little bit about what were some barriers to you running for office, and whether those were specific to you and like maybe they wouldn't, you know, be applicable in other races, but I think there's a real hunger. I know we've got a lot of people who are watching this right now, a lot of women who somewhere in the back of their head, they're thinking about, am I going to run for office? And I think these stories of people's very specific, you know, like this was, you know, my process, kind of help grow the greater context of, oh, okay, I could see myself in that. So do you guys want to take that one? Madam Auditor.
Okay, I'll start. And I don't want to be Pollyanna, but I think there are some places where we're doing better in Wyoming, and I think you mentioned it. You know, in the top 5, we do well in the legislature and county commission, and I don't know what the stats are on town council, but I would guess it's somewhat similar, is where we're really, really skewed in terms of numbers. And coming from the court system, I mean, it's fascinating that we now have a majority female Supreme Court. And I would tell you there's been, when we talk about structural change or whatever, there's been an immense increase in female judges at the district court and circuit court levels, because the question is, how do you get female Supreme Court justices? Well, you have good females in district court and circuit court positions. How do you get females in district court and circuit court positions? You have solid female partners in law offices. So it's a, when we talk about the pipeline, and again, I know that's sort of a small example, but that's somewhere where I think it's maybe not done, but it's been really successful. And that essentially happened. I mean, if you just look at the timeline, a lot of that happened under one governor. I mean, it was a very short period of time. There was like this much time where we had no female justices, and that got really compressed. And I feel like that's really a good story to tell. I don't feel like I had a lot of structural barriers necessarily that had a lot to do with my gender per se in a statewide role. Now, until you get into the more secondary connections of finances, because it's all about money, right? And so I would tell you that one of the biggest barriers is financial, but then that goes back to so many females are single mothers or are making less money than male counterparts, et cetera, et cetera. So then the focus then is, okay, we know where we're not doing well, and that's our legislature and our county commission. And I want to hit on something that Cynthia said, and something I thought about, is the distinction between structural barriers and social and individual barriers. And I think structural change is way easier than cultural change. And I think, I would throw out a hard example, and I think maybe, Sara, you've even heard me use this. Cynthia, you mentioned, gosh, taking your baby on the floor to breastfeed, right? And I was a long-time breastfeeder, so this hits home. So say I'm running for legislature, but I'm pregnant and I want to be able to breastfeed my child, so therefore I don't. Getting a rule passed that allowed a mother to bring an infant on the floor to breastfeed in our state legislature, my guess would not be that hard. It is the doing it. It is the actually doing it, and not the first person, the second, the third, the 10th, so that it is normalized. And that's where the much harder change to me comes. And many times, and I'm going a little off kilter here, I think oftentimes we're our own worst enemy. I know I was. I mean, when I think about the barriers of me running for office, most of them I had created in my head. I can't because, and so I think that's a conversation of convincing ourselves that we're able to as well. I have a lot more thoughts on that, but I don't want to go off, too far into the woods.
No, I don't. That's the path I think we're on. I just want to say, I don't know what's happening with my computer and why it looks like I'm now coming to you from a safe room. I'm not touching it. It's just doing that. I think that Madam Auditor speaks to a really powerful problem, right? To shift culture, it's not the first person, it's not the second person, it's the 10th, it's the 20th person. It's having men who will provide, allyship and help us normalize that. But I do want to push back a little bit on this idea that, yes, we might be our own worst enemies. Yes, we might have scripts in our head that contribute to a sense of, making the perfect the enemy of the good, or, needing to achieve that. But those scripts come from someplace, right? And a lot of times, I feel like that's my ask of, everybody, not just men, not just women, is, hey, please help contribute, to a dialogue where those scripts are not normalized. What's your experience been, Councilwoman Pollock?
Well, I think that I have come from a position of privilege in this account where a lot of barriers don't exist for me. I don't have children. I work for myself. I think when we think about the wage gap, another factor here is the wealth gap. Like, do you have enough money saved up to be able to go to the legislature for 2 months and attend all the meetings you need to attend to, or even at the local level, there's still a lot of meetings through the day. So do you have the flexibility in your job to just leave in the middle of the day to take a meeting or something like that? And I think that only certain people in our in our society really have that type of financial freedom. And that's something as a business owner that I have the flexibility, and I have more, say over my schedule and things like that. I do think the business element for me comes with a different barrier, though. I have the flexibility, but one of the biggest things for me was that I was nervous about the impact to my business of being in a leadership role that was public, and that people were going to be scrutinizing my decisions. And if I, did something that they didn't like, would there be an impact to my business side of things? And that worries me all the time. And that was really, one of the primary holdups for me, in addition to the time. It's a heavy time commitment. And when you've got, I'm married to a woman, so that's a different thing too, where in my household, gender roles operate very differently than they might otherwise. And so I think in the majority of households in our state and across the country, women are taking on a different share of the household job. And that takes up a lot of time as well, to where the time factor, I think, becomes a real barrier in a way that maybe not all men experience. And so I think, for me, I am in a certain set of circumstances that have let me sort of navigate and avoid those types of barriers. But I think when I think about women in general, to me, those are really big barriers that even if voting were fixed, ranked choice voting or something like that to help, it's still difficult. The fact that the legislature, meets for 2 months out of the year, and you basically have to not work and basically have to move for 2 months. It's like, well, who can do that? I mean, realistically, who can do that? Very few people. And if you have kids and you don't live in Cheyenne, man, that is tough. And so it's tough for a young person too. You're probably not in a, high ranking role in your company yet necessarily, to where you've got that flexibility. And so, I do think there are structural barriers, both in the way we set up our system and in the way we've structured our societies and our households.
Amen. 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 All of that. And I'm sorry, I tried to change my background to see if whatever my camera is doing would fix itself. My apologies. I thought that Representative Carly Provenza from Albany County did a really great job kind of publicly speaking to exactly that. There's a really great program, Leap into Leadership, that helps prepare women for public office and gives them sort of tips. But one of the things that, is said kind of, for as long as I've been participating in it, is this idea of maybe, we all move in circles of financial wealth. And I think one of the suggestions was, just go and find, 10 friends who can give you $300 or $400 or something. And, now Representative Provenza, then, candidate Provenza said, I'm a working class woman. I'm a grad student. I don't have friends who have $300 or $400. I have friends who have $300 to $400 of debt. Like, their debt won't help me get elected. And I think that many people had come before Carly and had thought that same thing, but had so internalized the idea of who belongs at the table. And that if you say, I don't have access to that kind of financial pool of wealth, that it was somehow disqualifying for public office. And getting back to like where those scripts come from, I mean, our legislature sometimes says publicly, on the floor, on record, if you are not financially well off, then, you lack a sort of moral fortitude, and maybe you shouldn't be here. We hear that in conversations about per diem. So I guess I'm going to use this last time. The voice of Jen Simon's father is in my head saying, hey, we have 16 minutes left. Let's be sharp, gals. So what I want to throw out to all of my amazing panelists is, if you've got a magic wand and your one and only goal is to change the landscape over the next 10 years. So in the year 2031, that all of these numbers are flipped, that we see from city councils to, county commissions, to the legislature, to the top 5. Well, we don't want to flip the top 5 because that one's good. We don't want to tip. We don't want to flip Supreme Court justices either. We're good there. But into our federal delegation, to just see robust leadership from women, and not just white women, not just able-bodied women, not just wealthy women, but that if this magic wand says, hey, when I'm done waving it, 10 years from now, our institutions will reflect the communities that they serve. It won't look like Wyoming is just made up of older white men who are adjacent to cattle. They're important. We love them. They're fantastic. Nothing against them, but that's not the whole of our state. So it's your wand to wave. Tell me, where that magic goes. What is one thing that you think could help make that shift? And Cynthia, we're gonna start with you because I think you think a lot about this nationally.
Well, as you can guess, I could talk for a long time on that topic, but I'll try to be very brief. Maybe a way to answer that is to say, I think we need to redefine what government is and not accept anymore a definition of it that is somehow outside of us or something other, but to bring it onto ourselves and say, wait, it's the people's house for Congress, and it's our houses in these state legislative buildings. And
Cynthia, I'm gonna ask you just directly, is there one policy that we could pass? Would it be from our state parties saying we're gonna commit to quotas? Would it be,
the single most effective thing to do would be affirmative action, intentional actions. Internationally, they're called temporary special measures. They're not necessarily the end goal, but they are the vehicle to get us there. We know that affirmative action has shifted power tremendously in this country already around race and the ability to go to school and the ability to do a lot of things. So yes.
I'm going to ask you maybe a question that may not be yours to answer, but we are allergic to the concept of affirmative action in the state of Wyoming. And I imagine it's a non-starter to ask maybe even both parties to commit to that. Do you have...
because Wyoming uses, every Democratic Party uses quotas for convention delegates, state party leadership, and local elections. When you go on your ballot, you're voting for some combination of 5 seats for men, 5 seats for women. There's a conversation I'm part of about how to recast that language so that it's inclusive of non-gender conforming people. So you don't have to choose between one or the other. So there's already this tradition in every state of electing the infrastructure of our party leadership, again, convention delegates, et cetera, through this process of saying we're going to have categories. We're going to have seats for women, seats for men, seats for non-gender conforming people. And I think I'm not saying it's a natural or easy conversation to jump to, but without that intentionality around saying to a party, you must set a commitment, even if it's a voluntary commitment, I think that would say a lot for the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, to say, we commit to increasing the number of women whom we recruit to run for office by some percent, 15% every election cycle, until we've reached parity in the number of women we're recruiting and supporting to run for office. Like, that would be a powerful thing in and of itself. I mean, even if the enforcement mechanisms, all that, were a little bit, shoddy on the other side, I think changing the nature of the debate would be a good thing. And donors, I think, can do that same thing. I think you spoke to that incredible wage gap, which is terrible, I think, and the need to have donors and PACs and institutions of democracy make a commitment that's public to say, we're going to support women candidates the same rate. We're going to increase the percentage that we give each election cycle until we reach parity in the number of candidates. I think that would be.
Did you say, Cynthia, that you would twin that with doing runoff elections as well?
Well,
Or
yeah,
ranked
I
choice?
mean, once you have more candidates, you definitely need a system that elects more women and people of color. And the data has been great that my organization has collected on the impact of ranked choice voting for women and people of color and lower income people and younger people in the 25 or so jurisdictions that use it now. Some big cities, Oakland and the Bay Area, and now New York City is using it. Exit polls have been great. 95% of people who used it found it very simple or simple to use. So that sort of is pretty persuasive, I think.
And Anna, we can get that information out to everybody who's on this call, right? Yeah, I think people would love that. Minority Whip Clifford, you've got a magic wand. What do you do?
I would like to elect 4 educated and experienced, but educated being not just the white man's education, but indigenously educated, 4 women on the Northern Apple Business Council and the Institutional Tribe. I think that's a great start. That would be my wand. We would get a lot of stuff done.
That's great. Yeah, I work with this group in my other job at Wyoming Equality, the Mama Dragons, and they're these LDS women who are really like protective and advocates for their LGBTQ children. And I always say, give me 20 of them in Wyoming and they'll change everything. So I see that. All right, Madam Auditor, what do you do with your magic wand? 10 years from now, what?
So if it's a magic wand, and we've talked about how there's no one silver bullet for these issues, but I think I would completely upend and or renovate campaign financing and make it so that is more of a level playing field. Doesn't fix the issue, but it at least it would equalize that playing field for all genders, all colors, all shapes, all sizes, and all quality of candidates. Right? There's races between men or between women where a very, very quality candidate falls between the cracks because they simply can't compete.
So give me would you kind of undo Citizens United? Do we have no PAC money? Do we have a tighter cap on PAC money?
I don't know. I didn't study what to do with my magic wand, Sarah, but
This is really fair.
I think that's the biggest thing is when someone is outspending, you can out charisma someone who's outspending you by 2 or 3 times. You can't out charisma somebody who's spending 10 times what you are, period. And that didn't happen to me, but I certainly see that happen.
I feel like Madam Auditor out charismas everyone, but that's personal. All right, Committee Woman Pollock, where do you wave this wand?
So I think where I would wave it, there's so many places, but I think what I would do, because I do believe like the issue is not that we don't have qualified women. The issue is not that we don't have women who are bringing a valued perspective to the table. Like those people exist all throughout our state. And I think we need to have a real conversation about how the way we've structured the way we do this business invites certain people to participate in that and excludes certain people from participating in that by its very nature. So for me, I think, we can leverage technology in ways that we have not before, which we have learned a lot about this year. I think we can leverage creativity in how we think about how we have conversations, what our decision-making processes are to say, can somebody—
Councilwoman Pollock, can I say that I feel like you were the kid when you got one wish, you wished for 10 more?
I did not.
This is a lot. You're going on a lot.
Here's what I'd say. If you want me to narrow it down, we need to be more creative about how we structure these jobs to make them manageable for lots of types of people. So women, young people, people with jobs, people who own businesses, people who have kids, people who live in Cheyenne, people who don't live in Cheyenne. And so like we kind of put it in a very small box about like how we imagine this work to happen. And I think that there are alternative channels and mechanisms that we could be leveraging that would make it possible for more people to do this. And I said that when I was running for office. They said, what type of time do you have to dedicate to this? And I said, I'll give it the time it needs. But I also think that we spend a lot of time that we don't need to spend trying to check a bunch of boxes that, maybe aren't really getting us closer to meaningful conversations and meaningful decision-making processes. So I don't like spending time like that. So I think some creativity in how we structure this.
Well, that was perfect. And you were right. Your wand was just right.
It was one thing. It was one thing.
It was one thing. And it speaks to Anna's, statement, or I don't know if it's Anna or Cynthia who said, when women work, we work collectively and we bring in a lot. Thank you for showing us that in action. We have a comment from Sue Summers saying, all of you women are amazing and you're crushing these questions. I love your visions and I want them all to come true. I think that's a pretty good note for us to wrap up. I just want to give you the opportunity, if you have any closing thoughts, something that you feel like if any young women are watching this and they're thinking, is some form of public service to me, what do you want to say to them? What's your send off for them?
If I can do it, anyone can. And I would also follow up that I got denied twice by trying to get on the Cheyenne Historic Preservation Board.
No.
For real. And then I finally got on it the third try, and it was kind of dry. I didn't really like it. No, I'm kidding. It was fine. It was interesting, but yeah.
I'd like to share, just don't give up. Keep trying. Keep trying.
Minority Whip Clifford, you ran unsuccessfully. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So that's a great, yeah. Ms. Cynthia?
Well, I would add there are about 520,000 offices and positions in the United States, many of which are in Wyoming. So there's a lot of opportunity to run, whether you're a student in middle school or elementary school or high school or college. There are boards and commissions, all kinds of things to run for and test your leadership and your skills of oratory and so forth. And there's no one set definition of leader that you have to adhere to. You can be, follow your own passions and, build relationships that help you climb that ladder. And that once you've, gotten a step up on a stone or a ladder step where you can see down a little bit, make sure you've turned around and extended your hand or a ladder to make sure some other people are coming up too. So,
Amen. Thank you.
Virtuous circle.
Thank you. Committee, I keep saying committee. It's that hard C. Councilwoman Pollock.
Yeah, I would just add that part of the way I think about it is actually you're obligated a little bit to do this. It's a duty, and it's a duty, and it doesn't have to be running for an elective office necessarily, but serving on a board, being part of some sort of community decision-making body, I think is something that everyone should put on their list to do in your life, because it's how we move forward. It's how we get things done in our communities, and your voice is necessary there. So really, like, you've got to find the fit for it and do it as a part of just existing as a good citizen in our communities.
Fantastic. And that's a good note, as I am apparently like Cheshire cat being absorbed into the ether. Thank you so much to every single one of you for coming on and sharing your wisdom. I could listen to all of you talk all night long. I hope we get the opportunity to do this again. There was a comment that I wish we could have gotten to, because it spoke to women's being put forward on county for statewide commissions, who were then very publicly not selected, and the chilling effect that has. And I hope that there's a further conversation where we can, speak about that and say, as women, do we have a role in creating better policies so that doesn't happen? But that'll have to be for next time. So thank you so much for joining us and taking your time this evening.
And thanks for joining us for the People's Review Live. The Equality State Policy Center is a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit organization. We rely on charitable gifts to fund all of our work. Donations can be made on the web at equalitystate.org or by mailing a check to 419 South Fish Street, Laramie, Wyoming 82070. Again, let us know if you'd like to sponsor this program and join the People's Review Live Leadership Circle. Our thanks to them for making tonight possible. And if you'd like to sign up for the newsletter, action alerts, or make a donation, just use the web address in the chat. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you at the next People's Review Live, where we'll be tackling more great topics. Have a great night.
Thank you.